My name is Brother Ross Weilitz. I'm a member of the Congregation of Christian Brothers, founded by Edmund Rice. I've spent most of my life as a high school teacher in the schools throughout the United States, teaching science, mathematics, religion. The last 10 years of my ministry, I studied and was certified as an addictions counselor. And for 10 years, I spent ministering as an addictions counselor, both in Tampa, Florida, and in the homeless shelter in Chicago, Illinois. Today's little program is about taking good care of your lungs. So we want to talk about 3 things that will give your lungs a disease and prevent you from breathing correctly. The 3 lung busters, which we're going to talk about today, is smoking nicotine and using nicotine products, e-cigarettes, and vaping and marijuana. Now, if you've started doing some smoking or vaping, it's time to quit. And if you haven't started vaping or trying to smoke, don't. It's a lot easier not to start, all right, than to try and quit. Now we'll go with things you need to know about smoking and vaping. Cigarettes kill more than these combined. Alcohol, cocaine, heroin, homicides, suicide, fires, car crashes, and AIDS. The tobacco-related deaths in the United States over a given year is about 480,000 people. 16 million in the United States have a smoking-related disease. Alcohol-related disease is 88,000 plus. Illegal prescription drugs is 100,000 people die in a given year in the United States. So you can see here that tobacco is much worse in death and dying than either alcohol or illegal prescription. We believe now in the United States that there are 40 million adults and over 4.5 million teens that still smoke in the United States. Smoking kills people by shortening their lives by 10 or 12 years. The lung cancer produced by smoking is over 85% of those who die of lung cancer. And all cancers, about 30% of the people die. Other diseases caused by smoking are heart disease, gastric ulcers, bronchitis, emphysema, stroke, and COPD. Now, I'll say a few words about COPD. You may hear this a lot watching television, but the C stands for chronic, meaning it doesn't go away. You have the disease forever. The O stands for obstructive, meaning that your lungs are diseased in such a way that the air cannot flow smoothly through your lungs. P is a fancy word meaning pulmonary, and pulmonary is a fancy word for lung or lungs, and the D is for disease. So probably when you're watching television, people have COPD, but it's a terrible disease. It can only get worse as you get older. If you smoke, 80% of adult smokers started to smoke when they were young. 75% of smokers who are teens will continue to smoke. And 70% of adults want to quit, but they can't because they're addicted to the nicotine. But it's just not cool anymore. And your health care costs, right, are going to be a drag on your finances. In the early days, when you were smoking a cigarette and you took a puff, you inhaled it, they call that a drag, taking a drag on a cigarette. In recent years, if you're smoking things like marijuana or vaping, you take a hit, take a couple of puffs of a marijuana cigarette, and you're taking a hit. But the expense of trying to buy smoking products is going to really hurt your pocketbook, and it's going to be a drag on your finances. We need to talk about chewing tobacco for a few moments, or snuff as it's called, which is the worst form of addiction caused by nicotine. Chewing tobacco gives you nicotine addiction, heart disease, cancers of the mouth, gums, and cheeks. And the way it's used is they put a wad of the tobacco between their gums and teeth and chew on it. When I was coaching a high school baseball team, early before practice, a couple of my sophomores were shagging fly balls in the outfield. Unfortunately, they were trying to chew tobacco. And a few minutes later, they were both bent over throwing up, getting sick from swallowing the tobacco. I had another experience, believe it or not, with my dentist. I was in the dental chair, and he was working on my teeth. So he went, and then he would take time out and spit tobacco juice into a cup. And then we would go, and then he would spit some more tobacco juice into a styrofoam. It was horrible. It was terrible. Here is a dentist, a professional, kind of based on good hygiene of the mouth, and he's chewing tobacco. So this is not a very, very good idea. Also, baseball has been the main sport where chewing tobacco became famous because a lot of the minor league teams were sponsored by the tobacco companies in the Southeast. A number of years ago, Major League Baseball banned chewing tobacco. Now the players can't do it. And sometimes when you watch sports, especially baseball, you might see the players chewing gum. So chewing tobacco overall seems to be a macho thing. But I do have one more story. I didn't think that the girls or the females would be chewing tobacco, but I did have a good friend of mine who was a college baseball coach, softball coach, for a girls' team in college, and a couple of his girls were chewing tobacco. Now I have my own little advertisements here for smoking. Here's one of a cigarette Kent 3. So if you smoke Kent 3, you can be sure you're going to wind up with a terrible, terrible cough. And I know my dad was a heavy smoker, and later on in his life, when he coughed, he had what they called the smoker's cough, and it was terrible. It kind of made you sick, even to hear it. But now if you want to smoke Doral cigarettes, all right, what will happen is, here's what it promises. It promises that you won't be able to breathe, and you're going to need a breathing. So finally, when I was a kid, Marlboro cigarettes had their cigarettes packed in a flip-top box, so that when you put the box into your pocket, your cigarettes will not be crushed. And so this is my view of what happens if you smoke cigarettes. And this also is a flip-top box. So that's the flip-top box you will end up in probably a lot earlier in your life than you think if you smoke cigarettes. And God made all human airways for fresh air. That's a very nice slogan to remember. God made all human airways for fresh air. Lung buster number 2 is e-cigarettes and vaping, the vaping community. This happened maybe 10 or 12 years ago. A subculture developed, and they developed a way of using liquid or wax forms of flavors, different flavors, and also marijuana. And they would smoke the marijuana, they would vape it. In other words, they would heat it up, the liquid or wax forms. It would become a vapor, and they would smoke the vapor, and they would pass it around the room as a vaping community. And this is just another example of putting into your lungs that which is not fresh air. High percentage of lung disease has been caused by vaping marijuana. The company Juul, J-U-U-L, was the company that produced all the products for vaping and put them on the market for people to buy, and also the contraptions that they've set up for doing the vaping and sharing it around the table. It is very addictive. You're, again, using something, vaping something into your lungs that is not fresh air. I don't know the answer to all this. It probably depends on what state you're living. At what age can you buy a vaping product? Probably at the smoke stores. And 1 in 4 teenagers have tried vaping. And the only statistic we have about vaping, that it caused 60 deaths in 2020, with 2,700 plus hospitalizations due to lung disease. These chemicals have no business being in the lungs. We'll repeat, repetition is the key to learning. God made all human airways for fresh air. And our last lung buster is marijuana. I didn't know what to put down here. We're going to talk about marijuana, whether it's a legal drug or whether it's an illegal drug. Because at the present time, I believe there are 38 states in the United States that have said it's okay to have medical marijuana. And at the present time, approximately 24 states have made recreation marijuana legal. There are 6 or 7 ways marijuana can be positive. if prescribed by a doctor, called medical marijuana, only to be used for medicine. Stress and anxiety, if you have chemotherapy, serious cancer, it will treat your nausea. It'll help with glaucoma in your eyes. It will treat severe pain. It will help with epilepsy. And they do give marijuana to people in deep pain near death to give them some sense of a lack of pain. And they also is used to help epilepsy and seizures and helps in Crohn's disease. If a doctor recommends it. They think that there are 20 to 25 million over the age of 12 smoking marijuana before school. Sometimes there's a group of students that get together before school starts and smoke. 31% of high school seniors that admit in marijuana use, etc. 20% 10th graders and 8.5% of 8th graders. And 20 to 25% of those teenagers that start to smoke marijuana will become addicted. All right, when you take marijuana, a couple of hits of marijuana, that's in the word, you'll get poor balance and coordination. You'll get dizzy. You'll have slurred speech, an easy laugh, and you'll get the munchies. And therefore, it's not a real good idea ever to drive if you're under the influence of marijuana, just due to the dizziness and the lack of balance and coordination. I've had some experience of withdrawal effects. I was working in Tampa as a substance abuse counselor with mostly men who were on probation for having been caught with marijuana. And in order for them to pass probation, they had to stop smoking marijuana. And they would be tested regularly about marijuana in their system. And they would come to me on a weekly basis for sessions, a group. And they would tell me when they stopped smoking marijuana, they would have these withdrawal effects. They would be very angry, short-tempered, fighting with their friends and girlfriends, boyfriends. They couldn't sleep. They were restless as kittens. And these are some of the effects of not having marijuana in your system. And so one of the big things about marijuana when you smoke it is you lose your motivation to fulfill responsibilities. And that's the physical addiction of marijuana. I have a story to tell you. It has to do with a young woman. We have 2 children. She was living in an apartment in Chicago. And she started smoking marijuana. She really, really liked the effects. So she eventually came homeless shelter where we tried to put her back together again and give her help. She mentioned to me that when she smoked marijuana, it made her feel so good that she wouldn't go to work. She stayed home and smoked marijuana. She lost her job. Losing her job, she lost money, and she was put out. She also mentioned that she became very sloppy as a mother when she was smoking marijuana. She didn't take good care of her kids. She didn't prepare them well for coming to school, etc. Now in Colorado, 2012, they legalized marijuana. And these are the problems that they had. Hospitalizations were up 82%. 25 to 40% of the rest were due to marijuana use. The college age use in Colorado bumped up to the 3rd in the nation. 48% of the U.S. tested positive for THC. And then, of course, the teenagers, 39% started to use pot because it was legal. And then, of course, expulsion and suspensions from school were up 32% due to having to take marijuana smokers out of the classroom. This is a program that I ran in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan. These were my student leaders, students against destructive decisions, and they did some programs for me. And one of the things I came up with is that approximately 10% of people that use marijuana will move to harder drugs. They always complain, is marijuana a gateway drug or is it or not? But they know that about 10% of those that start using marijuana will go on to harder drugs. I'm assuming that most of my audience on this program are either middle schoolers or high schoolers. And so we need to look at your youth and form good habits. You're in your habit forming years. You need to start working on the cleanliness of your body, good personal hygiene, Also, good dental hygiene for your teeth, brushing and flossing. Live a life of a good balance of rest and regular exercise. Choose your friends wisely. You may want to avoid the cool ones who are sharing joints before school, or those that are involved in alcohol abuse. Be very careful who you choose to be your friends. And then be generous with your time to help others. We're all spiritual beings, and it will bring you a sense of happiness and joy to help someone who is in need. And we got to remember our favorite slogan: God made all human airways for fresh air. I'm going to repeat that because repetition is the key to learning. God made all human airways for fresh air. Thank you for listening to this program.